There is a village in the Swiss Alps where for almost 3 months every winter the sun never touches the ground. The mountains around it are too high. The valley is too narrow. From November to early February, the houses sit in a kind of permanent twilight, lit by sky, but never by direct sunlight. People still live there. They wake up, they work, they raise children, they keep animals. They clear snow from rooftops that can collapse under the weight of a single bad storm. And when the sun finally returns, the entire village gathers to watch it. This is not a story about postcards. It is not the Switzerland of luxury watches, lakeside hotels, and chocolate boxes. It is something older, quieter, harder, and almost invisible from the outside. Because hidden inside the most photographed mountains in Europe, there are villages most travelers never reach. Places clinging to cliffs, perched above glaciers, cut off by avalanches for weeks at a time. And the people who live there are not relics. They are the reason these valleys still exist at all. From a distance, the Swiss Alps look settled. Trains glide between peaks. Cable cars climb effortlessly. Ski resorts spread across the slopes like small, organized cities. Everything appears engineered and easy, but that is the surface. Step away from the main valleys, leave the rail lines, follow the roads that narrow and twist and finally end. And a different Switzerland appears. A Switzerland of stone houses anchored to slopes that should not hold them. Of footbridges crossing gorges hundreds of feet deep. Of hamlets where the population is counted in dozens, not thousands. Of communities that have survived in the same location for 6, 7, sometimes 800 years. These are not abandoned places. They are inhabited, functioning, stubborn. And to understand them, you have to understand one thing first. In the high Alps, geography does not decorate life. It dictates it. Where the village sits, how the houses are shaped. When the cows come down from the pasture, which roof faces the avalanche path? Which window catches the last winter sun? None of it is decoration. All of it is survival logic, refined across centuries. And once you see that, the Alps stop looking like scenery. They start looking like a place where every stone has a reason. The village, the sun forgets. In a deep valley in central Switzerland, there is a village called Sonogno. It sits at the very end of the Verzaska Valley, where the road simply stops. Beyond it, there is no continuation, no tunnel, no pass. Just stone walls rising on 3 sides and a single way in. The houses here are not built from wood. They are built from the mountain itself. Slabs of gray gneiss stacked into walls, capped with heavy stone roofs that look almost geological. From a distance, the village seems to grow out of the rock rather than sit on top of it. That is not a stylistic choice. It is structural memory. For centuries, wood was too valuable to waste on roofs that had to survive avalanches, hail, and meters of snow. So the people of these valleys learned to roof their homes with the same stone the mountain offered. The slabs are heavy enough to hold against wind, dense enough to insulate, strong enough to outlast the families who laid them. Some of these roofs are over 300 years old. The same stones, the same angles, the same logic. And then there is the light. In the deepest Alpine valleys, the geometry of the mountains creates something most outsiders never imagine. During the heart of winter, the sun rises, but it never clears the southern ridge. It moves across the sky behind the mountain wall. The village stays in shadow for weeks. In some valleys, for months. The sky above is bright. The peaks across the valley glow gold at sunrise. But the houses themselves remain in cold blue half-light, as if the day were always about to begin and never quite arrived. This is the price of building where the mountains are tallest and the valleys narrowest. And the communities that chose these places knew exactly what they were trading. In exchange for shadow, they got water, pasture, protection from wind, defensible terrain. A rhythm of life tied so closely to the land that the loss of winter sun became simply another season. Endured, expected, accepted. When the first direct sunlight finally returns in February, in some villages the church bells still ring, not as celebration, as recognition. The houses that cannot fall. Walk through any of these high villages and you start to notice something strange. The houses lean slightly into the slope. Their foundations are uneven. Their walls are thicker on one side. Their roofs are pitched at angles that look almost wrong. Too steep in one place, too shallow in another. Nothing about them is symmetrical. And yet they have stood for centuries. Every house in a true mountain village is built around forces most people never have to think about. Snow load, wind direction, rockfall paths, spring runoff, the angle at which an avalanche would strike if it ever broke loose from the slope above. The traditional Walser house, found in the highest German-speaking villages of Valais and Graubünden, is one of the most refined examples of this thinking. It is built in two parts, a stone base, partially dug into the slope, used for storage, animals, and protection from cold. And above it, a wooden upper structure, raised on flat stone discs called staddle stones. These discs sit between the foundation and the wooden walls, and they exist for a single reason: to stop mice and rats from climbing into the grain stored inside. That is not a charming detail. That is the difference between surviving the winter and not. The wood used in these houses is larch, dense, slow-growing, and resinous enough to resist rot for hundreds of years. Over time, it darkens, first to brown, then to gray, then to a deep, almost black tone that absorbs sunlight and helps melt snow off the walls. In the highest villages, you can stand in front of a house and know, just by the color of the wood, roughly how long it has been there. A pale facade is recent, maybe 50 years. A deep charcoal gray facade is old, 300, 400, sometimes more. Inside, the layout follows the same survival logic. Low ceilings to trap heat, small windows to limit cold, a single central stove. Historically wood-fired, sometimes still in use today, that heated the entire structure through stone channels running through the walls. There was no waste, no excess, no decoration that did not also serve a function. It is a kind of architecture you only get when the cost of getting it wrong is your life. The bridges to nowhere. Some of these villages cannot be reached by road, not because the road is closed, because it was never built. In parts of Valais, in the Lötschental Valley, in pockets of Ticino and the upper reaches of the Bernese Oberland, there are hamlets that can only be reached on foot, by cable car, or by helicopter. In summer, mule paths still serve as the main supply lines. In winter, those paths are buried. To connect these places, generations of mountain people built footbridges across some of the deepest gorges in Europe. Some are made of stone, arched perfectly across torrents that drop hundreds of feet below. Some are made of wood, rebuilt every few decades when the timber finally gives way. And some are modern, long suspension bridges of steel cable, swaying gently in the wind, crossing voids so deep that looking down feels like looking into a different world. The Charles Quonen Suspension Bridge in Valais stretches nearly 500 meters across a single gorge. From the middle, the valley floor is so far below that the sound of the river barely reaches you. These bridges are not tourist attractions, even when tourists use them. They are infrastructure. They exist so that a child can get to school, so that a farmer can move animals, so that a priest can reach a church on a feast day, so that a community separated by geology can remain a community despite it. Without them, the villages would not just be isolated, they would be cut off entirely. The cows that know the way home. In late spring, something happens in these valleys that has happened in roughly the same form for over 1,000 years. The cows go up. This is the Alpine, the seasonal movement of cattle from the village to the high pastures, where the grass grows thick and sweet through the short Alpine summer. Families have done this for so many generations that the cows themselves seem to know the route. They walk in a slow procession along stone paths, their bells echoing across the valley walls. The largest cow in the herd wears the largest bell, and that position is earned, not given. For 3 or 4 months, the herders live with the animals at altitude. They sleep in small stone huts called mayans, buildings stripped down to the essentials: a bed, a hearth, a space to make cheese, because that is the real purpose of the climb. Up there in the high pastures, the milk produced by cows feeding on Alpine flowers and herbs is transformed by hand in copper cauldrons heated over wood fires into the wheels of cheese that have defined Swiss mountain culture for centuries. Gruyère, Sprins, Ledivaz, Raclette du Valais. These are not factory products. In their truest form, they are the result of a single summer, in a single hut with milk from a single herd, made by people who learned the technique from their parents, who learned it from theirs. And in autumn, when the grass thins and the first snow threatens, the cows come down. This descent, the Des Alpes, is one of the few moments when these hidden villages become visible to outsiders. The cows are decorated with flowers and enormous ceremonial bells. Families line the streets. The whole community turns out to welcome the herds back from the heights. To an outsider, it looks like a folkloric celebration, but it is older and stranger than that. It is the closing of a contract between a village and a mountain, a confirmation that the summer survived everyone, that the animals are intact, that the cheese is made, that the year, in the way that matters most up here, has held together, and then winter begins. The language of the high valleys. One of the strangest things about the most isolated Swiss villages is what you hear when you walk into them. Switzerland has 4 official languages. Most people know that. What most people do not know is that in the highest and most cut-off valleys, there are languages and dialects spoken nowhere else on Earth. In the mountains of Graubünden, there is Romansh, a Romance language descended directly from the Latin of Roman soldiers, preserved in the high valleys long after it disappeared everywhere else. It has multiple regional forms, some so distinct that a speaker from one valley can struggle to understand a speaker from the next. It survives because the mountains kept it alive. When a valley is hard to reach, language drifts slowly. Words stay, sounds stay. The way a grandmother spoke to her children 700 years ago still echoes in the way a child speaks today, with only small mutations along the way. In Valais, in the Walser villages, there is a German that is not really German anymore, a high Alemannic dialect that developed in isolation with vocabulary that traces back to medieval times. In Ticino, The Italian spoken in the deepest valleys has its own rhythm, its own words for things that exist only in this geography. A specific snowfall, a particular kind of pasture, a wind that blows only on certain days of the year. Languages are not just communication, they are inventories. And the languages of the High Alps are inventories of a world that almost no one outside these villages still knows how to describe. The winter that tests everything. There is a moment every year when the high villages stop pretending. The first heavy snow comes. The temperature drops. The roads where they exist freeze. The cable cars slow down. The helicopters fly only when the weather allows. And the villages turn inward. This is the part outsiders almost never see. In the deep months of winter, a village like Yuf, the highest permanently inhabited settlement in Europe, sitting above 2,100 meters in Graubünden, becomes a small, contained world. Fewer than 30 people, snow piled against the walls of houses, a single road that may or may not be open. People here do not survive winter by accident. They prepare for months. Wood is cut and stacked in the right places to dry. Roofs are inspected for weakness. Food is stored. Animals are brought down to the lower stables. Routes between houses are mapped so they can still be followed when the snow rises high enough to swallow fences. When a storm hits, the village does not panic. It contracts. People stay inside. Stoves burn. Conversations stretch. Time slows down to the rhythm of weather, not work. There is a kind of quiet here that does not exist in cities. Not silence exactly, but the steady, low presence of snow falling for hours, then days, on a roof above your head. And then there are the avalanches. Every village in the High Alps knows where the avalanche paths run. Every house was built, or not built, with those paths in mind. Some villages have avalanche barriers above them, massive steel and concrete structures bolted into the slopes to break up sliding snow before it can gather force. But not all dangers can be engineered away. In 1999, the village of Evelyn in Valais was struck by an avalanche that destroyed houses and killed people. It was not a freak accident. It was the kind of event that happens every few generations in places where the mountains decide to remind their inhabitants who is really in charge. The villages rebuild. They always do. But they never forget. The people who stayed there is a question that hangs over every isolated Alpine village. Why are you still here? For decades, the answer has been getting harder. Young people leave for the cities. Schools close when there are not enough children to fill them. Shops shut. Post offices disappear. Some of the smallest hamlets, especially in Ticino and parts of Graubünden, have shrunk to just a handful of permanent residents, most of them elderly. This is not a story unique to Switzerland. It is happening across mountain Europe. But here, something else is also happening. A small but growing number of younger people are coming back, not as tourists, as residents. They return because they grew up in these villages and could not, in the end, settle anywhere else. They return because they want to raise children where the air is clear and the night sky is uninterrupted by light. They return because some part of them still belongs to a valley they only half remember. And they bring new things with them. Internet, remote work, small workshops, cheese-making revivals, restored houses, new ideas grafted onto old structures. The villages do not become modern in the lowland sense. They become something stranger, a layering of centuries, where a 400-year-old stone house might have a fiber optic cable threaded through its walls, and a woman speaking a dialect older than Swiss federalism might be on a video call with a colleague in another country. This is not the Switzerland of cliché. This is a Switzerland still negotiating its own future, one valley at a time. The churches in the stone. Almost every isolated Alpine village has a church. Sometimes it is the largest building for many kilometers. Sometimes it is barely larger than a house. But it is almost always the oldest structure in the community, and almost always the most carefully maintained. In the deepest valleys, these churches are extraordinary. Some are built from the same stone as the houses around them, with bell towers that rise just high enough to be heard across the valley. Others are decorated inside with frescoes painted centuries ago by traveling artists who would walk from one mountain village to the next, working in exchange for food and shelter. In the Muster Valley in Graubünden, there is a monastery, St. John, whose interior contains some of the oldest Christian frescoes in the Alps, painted around the year 800. They have survived earthquakes, wars, climate, and simple time. They are still there because the valley around them was just isolated enough to be left alone and just inhabited enough to be cared for. This is a pattern across the high Alps. The most fragile cultural treasures often survived not in the great cities, but in the places too remote for invading armies, too poor for plundering, too quiet for anyone to bother destroying. Isolation in these valleys was a form of preservation, and the bells of these churches still ring at the right hours, marking time the way they have for centuries. Through fog, through snow, through the long winter shadow. What the outside world misses. The Switzerland most people imagine is a country of efficiency and luxury. Trains running on time, banks, watches, spotless cities. Lakes that look polished, the kind of place that feels designed by an engineer. That Switzerland exists, it is real, but it is not the whole country. Behind it, woven into the highest folds of the Alps, there is another Switzerland, older, slower, harder, and more complicated. A Switzerland of villages where time is measured in seasons, of houses that have outlasted dynasties, of languages that exist nowhere else, of communities that survive because every generation chooses again to stay. These places are not a museum. They were not built for cameras. They do not exist to confirm anyone's idea of what mountain life should look like. They exist because hundreds of years ago, someone decided that this slope, this stream, this small piece of impossible terrain was enough to build a life on. And then the people who came after them decided the same thing, and the people after that. Eventually it became a village, and then a tradition, and then an inheritance no one quite knew how to put down. When you walk into one of these villages, really walk into it, not just past it, something shifts. The mountains stop being scenery. They start being context. The houses stop being picturesque. They start being functional. The silence stops being empty. It starts being full of the things you cannot hear in cities. Wind moving across stone, water running under ice, a single bell from somewhere across the valley, the soft creak of an old roof carrying the weight of a long winter. And you understand finally that the famous Switzerland, the one in the photographs, is only the surface. The real one lives higher up. In the shadows, in the stone, in the places the sun forgets for months at a time, in the villages most people will never see, and the people who chose against everything to keep them alive. This is hidden Switzerland, and it has been here, quietly, all along.
Yeah.